So China, what do we make of China? And more importantly, what do we make with our relationship with China? In 1939, Winston Churchill said this of Russia during a radio broadcast. He said, and I quote, "Russia is a riddle wrapped up in a mystery, in an enigma." Now remember, Churchill said this because he found it difficult to comprehend why Russia had unexpectedly agreed to ally itself with Nazi Germany and invade Poland. The reason Russia was able to do this is because, just like China today, it played by its own rules, and because it does not answer to its citizens. This makes it unpredictable. As a functioning democracy, Australia plays by agreed international norms, as we should do. And that is the challenge for Australia, though. China is by far and away our biggest trading partner, yet at the same time, our values are diametrically opposed. Let us just take a brief history lesson to find out how we got to where we are today. At Federation in 1901, China accounted for only 0.3% of Australian trade. We imported generally tea, rice, and luxury goods, and exported mainly minerals. Throughout the 20th century, Australia increasingly exported agricultural goods. In 1972, Australia and China established diplomatic relations. But the most significant change in our trading relationship occurred in 1979, when China, which until then had been a centrally planned economy, opened its borders to foreign investors and trade. Since then, China has experienced the longest sustained growth of any country in history. So if we fast forward to 2007, and China became Australia's largest trading partner, and in 2009 its largest export market. This trade continued until the trade war began in around 2018. Now remember this though, while China is by far and away Australia's largest trading partner, more than double that of our next trading partner in Japan, Australia is only China's 7th largest trading partner. So what does this mean? Well, on a macroeconomic level, it basically means that we need them more than they need us, and we both know it. The foundations of Australia's economy is built on its export market. Well, perhaps more accurately, it's mining, but only to the extent that we export what we mine. Our mineral exports, healthily supplemented by agricultural and other goods, is literally the reason why we are one of the wealthiest nations on the planet. In 2021, our total exports was 343 billion, but 40% of that was to China. That is a staggering $137 billion, or about $10,000 for every working Australian. Now, the trade war with China has blocked about $20 billion worth of exports. That is nearly double what the government spends educating our children in government schools. Just think how much smarter all of our children will be if we doubled public investment in education. Well, maybe not that much smarter, but it would be nice to find out, wouldn't it? So let's take a look at the industries that were hit the hardest. Wine down over 99% from 1.2 billion to only 8 million. Education down 70%. Barley down 61%. And coal was probably the most affected when China imposed an unofficial and outright ban on the import of Australian coal. Other prominent industries affected included seafood, tourism, meat, cotton, and fruit. So what do our current relations with China look like? Well, fortunately, relations are thawing as our current government is committed to friendlier relations than our last one. This has meant that our trade is increasing, and some industries have returned to similar levels to where they were at before the trade tensions started. So, our trade war with China has run almost concurrently with that of the US trade war with China, instigated in 2018 by none other than Mr. Donald Trump. Now, this is not a coincidence, but do we really need to follow suit with America and antagonize our relationship with China? Look, maybe we do. I don't want to get into international politics, and I get that we sometimes need to scratch the backs of our democratic allies. But that is exactly the point. With China representing so much of our export market, our economy is too exposed to the whims of an unpredictable trading partner and the vagaries of international politics. We saw what happened to energy prices in Europe when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. Yes, that's right, it's nearly 2 years ago. I was surprised too. Now, most countries around the world, but particularly in Europe, understandably imposed immediate trade sanctions on Russia, and the price of gas doubled. This led the German government to legally restricting the use of heating, and thousands of elderly people dying from the brutally cold European winters because they couldn't afford to heat their homes. There were stories in the UK of retired people sitting on buses all day because it was the only way they could afford to keep warm. Now, fortunately, most of Australia is not as cold as Europe, so we won't face that particular problem. Well, unless you happen to live in Tasmania, but if you do, then you probably have bigger problems to worry about. I'm just joking there. I love Tasmania. Is anyone in the audience from Tasmania? No? No, that's a shame. It's a beautiful place, but only in the summer. So, in all seriousness, though, this is what can happen to your economy when too much of your trade is with a nation that does not play by democratic norms. And make no bones about it, China does not play by democratic norms. Now, if China was to invade Taiwan, and let's face it, do you really want to gamble on China not invading Taiwan? Then the political realities are that Australia will have no choice but to impose trade sanctions on China. That is just a political reality. America will do it, Japan will do it, the UK will do it, the rest of Europe will do it. What are we going to do down here in Australia, in this corner of the world? Say sorry to all of our democratic allies? We get it, we understand, we just have to sit this one out. And then what? Hope that New Zealand backs us? Of course not. Now, fortunately, when China blocked many of our exports, we found other markets that were willing to purchase our goods, particularly in Mexico, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam. But let's be clear, this was not a strategic plan. You could argue we got lucky. And I suppose we are fortunate enough that as a nation, we are able to produce high quality goods that other countries are prepared to buy. But we sold them at a reduced cost because we lost all of our bargaining power. Do we really want to go through that again? Absolutely not. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to reduce our dependence on our economic life support, that is China. I'm not saying we don't trade with China. That is not what this is about. Of course we do. We just limit our exposure so that if political circumstances lead to a reduction or a cessation in trade with China, the impact will not bite anywhere near as much. So how do we do this? Well, importantly, we have to do it without antagonizing China because we need to continue to trade with them, and they will remain an important trading partner. But this is difficult. I would suggest that a sensible economic strategy is one which sees a slow and steady increase in exports to other countries to offset an equally slow and steady decrease in exports to China. I have no doubt this will mean some diplomatic challenges with China, but our politicians have to find a way to manage this. I also acknowledge that Australian businesses will have to pay a small premium for this policy. However, we should view this as nothing more than an inexpensive insurance policy. Because if things blow up with China, this insurance policy will be the best investment that Australia ever made.